Hello and welcome to the Parkinson's Foundation Wellness Wednesdays webinar. I'm Krista Ellis, Community Engagement Manager for the Parkinson's Foundation. Helping me behind the scenes are my colleagues Laura Cameron and Jenny Fearday. The Parkinson's Foundation is a nonprofit focused on bettering the lives of those living with Parkinson's through improving care and advancing research. Importantly, everything we do is in close concert with our community to ensure that our actions are aligned with the needs and priorities of those living with PD. Today, we will learn how maintaining a healthy weight is key to living well with PD and explore why keeping weight on and retaining muscle mass can be a challenge for someone living with Parkinson's. We are recording today's presentation. You will receive a follow-up email with a link to today's recording and other resources in the coming days. The Parkinson's Foundation provides weekly education and wellness programs virtually through our PD Health at Home series, including Mindfulness Mondays, Wellness Wednesdays, Fitness Fridays, expert briefings, and our Spanish language programming, Y Salud en Casa. Join us for our next Wellness Wednesday webinar on January 17th to learn about the changes in voice and speech that may manifest with Parkinson's. Most people with Parkinson's disease will experience changes in speech and voice at some point during the course of the disease. Learn tools and exercises to help you better understand and manage speech and communication challenges in Parkinson's. Find out more and register for our PD Health at Home events at parkinson.org/pdhealth. To begin our formal presentation, we would like to introduce today's expert presenter. Shameem Kizar completed her Bachelor of Science degree in Nutrition and Food Science at the University of Alberta and her postgraduate dietetic internship at the Health Sciences Center in Winnipeg, NB. Shameem is the Outpatient RD for the Neurosciences program at the Kaye Edmonton Clinic and works in the Movement Disorders program, ALS Clinic, MS Clinic, and the Epilepsy Clinic. Shameem has 21 years of experience in inpatient and outpatient care in the areas of neurology, medicine, surgery, GI, pulmonary, psychiatry, and home nutrition support. She has worked in the Movement Disorders Clinic for the last 10 years and values the interdisciplinary approach to care. She has a passion for food, I think we all do, and nutrition, and believes food is an integral part of health. Shameem, thank you for joining us today and sharing your time. There it is.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Parkinson's Foundation, for asking me to present today. I'm really excited to be here. So let's start. We're going to talk about managing weight loss and retaining muscle mass in Parkinson's disease. So mouse is not working well. There we go. I have no disclosures to report other than I'm not a big fan of quinoa and kale, but don't report me. Just a quick little slide on who I am. As Krista said, I've been working for 20 years plus as a registered dietitian. I come to you from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is pretty much close to the North Pole. I work in the Movement Disorders program here, which is a center of excellence. I, as Krista said, love food, love talking about it, eating it, looking at it, anything with food related, I'm there. For those of you who aren't familiar with where Edmonton is, it's very cold right now. We've actually had a really good winter, but cold has come today. We're in Celsius and you guys are in Fahrenheit for the most part. But when you get into the negative numbers, it doesn't matter. So it feels like minus 30 today, and it is going to be feeling like it's minus 48 this weekend. So it's brutally cold, but we're fine. There's a picture of Edmonton, and the building is where our clinic is located. So these are the learning objectives for today. One of the first things we're going to talk about is some common causes of weight changes in Parkinson's disease, why and how Parkinson's patients experience challenges in retaining muscle mass. I'm hopefully going to give you some tips on how to maintain weight and muscle, and then some information about when to seek out help. So the first thing we need to define is malnutrition. What is it? It's basically an easy way to describe it would be undernutrition. It's an imbalance of energy, protein, and other nutrients that can result in changes to body size, body shape, body composition. Over time, this can lead to functional impairment like muscle loss and weakness. People living with Parkinson's may be at a higher risk to be at risk for malnutrition versus other people of the same age. So malnutrition can really increase your risk of falling. It can increases your risk of developing osteoporosis, increases your risk of mortality. It can lead to longer hospital stays. It can decrease your immune function, so recovery takes longer. So even something like a minor cold might take a little bit longer to get over. It can definitely delay wound healing. So if you have any surgeries, just a recovery from that can become more challenging. And these all can lead to lower quality of life and poor health outcomes. So when we're looking at Parkinson's and malnutrition, like why would those two kind of go hand in hand, or why would somebody with Parkinson's be at risk for malnutrition? So a lot of the symptoms of Parkinson's disease place those with the disease at higher risk of decreased intake and increased loss of weight and lean body mass. So lean body mass is basically loss of muscle. So I'm going to kind of go quickly through some of the Parkinson's symptoms that can impact nutrition. So the first group would be some of those clinical symptoms. So things like bradykinesia, which is that slowness in movement, or akinesia, which is that difficulty in initiating movements, and then rigidity, tremor. Any one of these symptoms can make it less likely for someone to be able to shop for themselves, cook for themselves, feed themselves. And so those can all impact your ability to get in adequate nutrition. Then there's your neuropsychiatric symptoms. So these things are like depression, anxiety, dementia, confusion, apathy. Any one of these or multiple one of them can lead to like decreased food intake, which can lead to weight loss. And then there's your non-motor symptoms. So these are some of the more common non-motor symptoms. So some people with Parkinson's can experience dysphagia, which is the difficulty in swallowing. And so if your swallow muscles are affected, it definitely can impact your intake and can lead to weight loss. Constipation is a very common one with Parkinson's patients, and it can really impact appetite. Because if you think anyone who's experienced constipation, like it's literally that stool kind of pushing up on your stomach, making it smaller. You don't feel like eating, you just feel full and not wanting to have another meal. Loss of smell, also very common with Parkinson's patients, can really affect taste, which again, if things don't taste as they should or as they had been, then you're probably going to eat less, which can result in weight loss. Early satiety, this is basically feeling fuller a lot earlier than before. Like before you can finish a meal, you're just like, oh, it's just too much. I can't eat anymore. I'm full. You just might find that you're just eating smaller amounts. Or you might stop eating. You might decrease your meals from 3 a day to 2 a day because you're just feeling full all the time. Another common non-motor symptom would be delayed gastric emptying. So this is just food is taking a lot longer to leave your stomach um, after eating. So you've just got slowed down digestion. So this makes you feel full. It decreases your appetite. You thereby eating less. Sleep disorders. So if you're not getting a good enough sleep or enough sleep, this can really affect how you're feeling, your mood, which again can then affect your appetite and your intake. And then sialorrhea is excessive drooling. And so it can make it really challenging to eat when you have difficulty managing the saliva in your mouth. And then there's pharmaceutical therapy. So the medications that we use to alleviate symptoms in Parkinson's, so levodopa, the gold standard, can really influence nutrition as well. So it can, for some people, make them nauseous and feel like throwing up. It can lead to weight loss. It can lead to like motor fluctuations or off periods. And so when people are experiencing off periods, they may have increased anxiety, apathy, fatigue, that certainly can impact their ability to eat or wanting to eat more. And then there's dyskinesia, which is that uncontrolled involuntary movement. That movement is burning off more calories, thereby resulting in potentially weight loss as well. So, despite what's currently out there, weight loss isn't always a good thing. And so, weight loss can actually lead to frailty, which can lead to poor health outcomes. And frailty and Parkinson's disease is not a good fit. So, why should we be concerned about weight loss? So, when we're talking about weight loss, what we're talking about is unintentional loss of weight. And unintentional loss of weight, especially as we age, can affect many aspects of a person's life. So, with unintentional loss of weight comes loss of muscle. we need muscle to function. We need it to get out of the bed in the morning, to get dressed, to feed ourselves. So we need muscles for independence. And so we live in a world where weight loss is typically glamorized. Weight loss is something that we congratulate people and encourage people, regardless of how it comes off, right? And so for older adults, particularly ones that are maybe a little bit sicker, a little frailer, unintentional weight loss can really, really be something that we need to be concerned about because it really can affect adults' independence and their lack of taking care of themselves and can also lead to early death. So, one of the biggest problems we live with is that people don't see unintentional weight loss as a problem, right? It's typically disregarded by the patient themselves or the family members, even caregivers. And our culture really glamorizes weight loss, and really we see it as a noble and healthy pursuit. But when you lose weight unintentionally, and when you ignore or praise it, like people don't see this as an issue. But like as I said, as you lose that unintentional weight loss, you've lost muscle and you lose independence. So it is a very serious issue. And so my hope is that after this talk is that we actually do see this as something that it needs to be something to be concerned about. And the thing is that, don't worry about like dietary restrictions or health foods when you're treating somebody with unintentional weight loss. The risk of unintentional weight loss, like malnutrition, muscle loss, loss of independence, potentially death, those are all like we need to prevent those. So that becomes the highest priority versus like, trying to make sure you're eating all your fruits and vegetables. So the question I get always asked is like, well, when should I be concerned? So one of the first things you need to know is your usual body weight. And so usual body weight is not the weight that you graduated from high school with or the weight you were at your wedding. That's not what usual body weight is. Usual body weight is the weight that you've been the majority of your adult life. So if you see a dietitian or if anyone, a health professional asks you, what's your usual body weight? Think about what your weight has been for the majority of your life or even what it's been for the previous 5 years. That's usually a good indication. And that's typically what I'm asking when I ask that question. I get a lot of people who tell me what their weight was before when they graduated high school. And I'm always like, okay, but you're 75. It doesn't count, right? So, and so when we're looking, you know what your usual body weight is, and where you need to be concerned is if you've lost about 5% of your usual body weight in 1 month, that is a significant weight loss. So I've given some examples up there on the screen. So if you're 175 pounds and you've lost 5%, that's a 9-pound weight loss in 1 month. And if you're smaller, like if you're about 125 pounds, it's 6 pounds in 1 month. So it's not a large volume of weight that we're talking about where we should be concerned about. And if you don't have a scale, if you notice that your pants are looser, that may be a reason for concern. And when I say pants, I'm like, these are not elasticized pants. These are pants with a waist. If those are looser, that is something to be concerned about. However, if you have elasticized pants and they're really loose, we've got some big problems there. So what can you do to maintain your weight? So one of the first things that, with my patients, they're always like, oh, I can't eat more. So it's not about like the volume, but it's really about the nutrient density of the food. So you have to make every bite count. So here are some examples of some high calorie foods that I would typically get people to try to incorporate in their routine more often. So oils and fats. So these are things like olive oil, avocado, coconut oil, canola, any insert oil there that you like to use. That is what we're talking about when it comes to oils. Butter or plant-based spreads are an excellent option too, whichever your preference is. And again, be generous with all of those. Nuts and seeds. So these are all excellent, high nutrient dense foods. So what I mean by that is in small volumes, they pack a big nutritional punch when it comes to calories and protein as well. And I always get asked, like, what's the best nut? What's the best seed? There's no such thing. They're all good. Eat the ones that you can. And when it also includes nut and seed butter. So it's not just peanut butter. If you like almond butter, cashew butter, sunflower butter, like whatever, sunflower seed butter, I should say, whatever it is that you like, use those. And again, be really generous with that. Avocado is also a really high calorie food. You can have it on toast, you can throw it in salads, you can throw it in smoothies. You can also blend them in sauces. So, for instance, if you're having like a pasta sauce, you can blend it in and use it sort of like for it to become like a cream-based sauce. And again, avocado is a very neutral flavored food, so it's not going to overpower. So if you make a cream-based sauce, it's still going to have that creamy taste to it, but you're going to add significant amount of calories into that same volume. Coconut. So coconut is another high calorie food. And so we're talking about canned coconut milk. That is the one that I'm really trying to stress versus the coconut milk that comes in a carton. That one's predominantly made from water and wouldn't be a high calorie food. This is the one that comes in the can. Like in the full fat version, don't buy that low fat stuff. Buy the full fat. That one you can use in soups, sauces, smoothies. You can drizzle it on cereals. You can drizzle on anything that you want. That's a nice high calorie food item. And then dairy is always a big high calorie food option as well. And so we're talking full fat is your friend there. Cheeses, yogurts, ice cream, cottage cheese, milk, you name it. It's all high calorie options for you. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of like, how can you make your meals high calorie? So I thought I'd break it down into some meals. So for instance, with breakfast, some quick, easy ways to make that bowl of oatmeal. So again, it's not about changing the volume that you're eating, but making it more nutrient dense. So if you're an oatmeal fan, one of the quick first things you can do is cook your oatmeal in full fat milk or canned coconut milk if you're dairy free versus water. That alone will increase the caloric content of your oatmeal. Adding hemp hearts and chia seeds, flaxseed to that bowl of oatmeal. Again, it doesn't increase the volume that you're eating, but it'll increase the nutrient density. And when I say add them, I'm like, add like a tablespoon of each of those if you can to your bowl of oatmeal. So again, you're not increasing volume, but you're really increasing the nutrient density. And then also adding some nuts on top is another easy way to make that bowl of oatmeal more calorically rich. Peanut butter on toast, that's another common breakfast for people. A couple of things you can do to make that also nutrient dense is choosing a nutty seedier bread versus say a white bread, which would make that bread alone more calorically dense. Be very generous with your peanut butter. Like there's no like, back in the 80s, the light spread of peanut butter that we always talked about. You want a good thick amount of peanut butter on there. And then the other way to just again make this peanut butter toast more calorically dense is grabbing those hemp hearts or chia seeds and sprinkling those on top of your peanut butter toast. So again, you haven't increased, I'm not telling you to eat 5 slices of peanut butter toast. If you want to, go right ahead. But if you're only able to eat 1 or 2, you're making that toast more calorically dense. Eggs. So again, I hear this a lot with patients, when I ask them like, well, how many eggs do you have? And people are always like, oh, I have 1. And I'm like, my 7-year-old eats 1. So, again, if you're like 65, I think we can eat 2, 3. I would like people to eat 3 or 4 eggs, but that's a hard sell. So if you can do 2 eggs minimum, that is a place to start. If you enjoy cheese, again, mixing the cheese into your egg mixture or on top is a great way to add some extra calories. If you're doing scrambled eggs, like mixing some heavy cream or whole fat milk to scramble them up. Before cooking is another way you can add some calories to that mix. And then when you're cooking your eggs, like really be generous by cooking them in more butter or oil than you normally would. And then afterwards, pour that butter or oil on top of your eggs so that you get the full benefit of all of that into your serving size. Cereal, this one's a tough one because it's hard to find like a decent cold cereal. But you really, ones with lots of nuts or dried fruit in them can really be higher calorie. Granola is a good example. Using a full fat milk would also be another good example of a way to increase the caloric content. So none of the skim milk stuff. So 2% minimum, but preferably full fat is a way to go. And then some other meals, so with your lunches and suppers. So if you enjoy soups, you want to try to choose those cream-based soups a bit more often because they are more calorically dense. Using full-fat milk or canned coconut milk, again, if you're dairy-free, would be a way to increase the calorie content of your soup. Drizzling on top of your serving a drizzle of like olive oil or whatever oil that you prefer is also another way to add calories without increasing volume. If you're a sandwich fan, like a salad-based sandwich, so like something like a tuna salad or an egg salad or a chicken salad, you can use full-fat mayo. I'd also suggest trying like mashed avocado with the mayo or instead of mayo. Again, avocado is high calorie, so it would also just make your filling more calorically dense. Again, using that nuttier, seedier bread would also add some calories to it. uh, if you don't want to add the avocado to the mixture, or say you're doing like a deli meat type of sandwich, you could add slices of avocado to your sandwich. If you enjoy cheese, please add cheese to your sandwich. Um, Also consider like adding like butter or a plant-based spread on your bread first and then adding the other condiments on top. Also, again, making every bite count there. And then with other meals, do kind of what they do in the Mediterranean. Like after a meal is done and before being served, like they'll drizzle olive oil on top of the serving or on top of the dish. You can do the same thing with butter, plant-based bread, oil of your choice, again, to make that serving a little bit more calorically dense. So the next thing we're going to talk about is muscle and aging. So this one is always important. So as we age, we tend to lose muscle, unfortunately. And also as we age, we also tend to eat less protein. And protein is what our muscles use to maintain itself. And so the goal is really to maintain muscle as much as possible. And it's very difficult to rebuild and regain muscle as we get older. And there's a lot of reasons. One of those is this, we just have lower hormone levels. So we have lower levels of testosterone. So we just aren't able to build muscle the same way as we did when we were younger. And then, like I said, a lot of times as we get older, we tend to eat less protein. So it's hard to build protein. So the goal is always maintain protein as much as possible. And so how can you maintain protein or muscle? So muscles use protein much more effectively in smaller amounts, but more frequently throughout the day. So you don't, what happens is we don't store excess protein as muscle when so if we have a large protein meal, the extra protein doesn't get stored as muscle. Gets stored as fat, which is important, but we really want to maintain muscle as much as possible. And like I said, we found that muscle is maintained much more effectively if we have protein in smaller amounts throughout the day. And the other thing that you can do to help maintain muscle is strength or resistance training. That is also another key aspect of helping to maintain muscle. And so, as I think a lot of us, we all know this, right? Exercise can improve balance. It can give you more energy. It can help counteract disease and improve brain function. And so, when I'm talking about resistance training, some of the things you can consider would be squats to chair, a resistance band workout, wall push-ups, toe stands. I would strongly recommend, if that's something that you're interested, to contact and consult with your medical team, ask to be referred to a physical therapist who specializes in Parkinson's disease if possible before you start any program, just to make sure you're doing everything as safely as possible. So the question I always get asked is like, well, how can I spread out my protein intake, right? So the vast majority of people probably have the majority of their protein in one meal in the day. But like I said, our muscles use protein much more effectively and efficiently if we spread it out throughout the day. So I always try to get people to aim for 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal. And protein is found in meat, eggs, dairy, including like yogurt, cheese, cottage cheese, milk, grains, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds. They're all excellent sources of protein. So fruits and vegetables have protein, but just in smaller amounts. So pretty much the only vegetable that is surprisingly high in protein would be peas, like green peas. 1 cup has about almost 9 grams, which is a fairly decent amount of protein in there. So when we're talking about protein, we're mainly focusing on the meats, the eggs, dairy, grains, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds. Those are your bigger bangs for your buck. Oh, this has not happened. What I like about this is, so I always get the question like, well, how much protein is in my food? And I think people have a real misunderstanding. I think sometimes we overestimate how much protein is in certain foods. And so when we're looking at this, like I said, dairy is a really high source of protein. So if you're, like a glass of milk has about 9 grams of protein in there, a half a cup of Greek yogurt has about 12 grams of protein. Cottage cheese is an excellent high protein food choice. So half a cup has about 17 grams of protein. So it's not a large volume. Again, 1 ounce of cheese has about 8 grams of protein in there. So depending on the type of cheese. So again, it's just knowing the goal is like trying to aim for that 20 to 30 grams at a meal. And so you just kind of try to make sure that you're having protein at each meal. So if you're choosing a non-dairy alternative, if dairy is something that you don't eat, then you really want to look at soy milk. It's about 7 to 8 grams at a serving. Or pea milk, again, PEA, which is made from green peas. It has 8 grams of protein in 1 cup. So those are good high protein choices when it comes to non-dairy milks. Almond, cashew, rice, coconut, hemp milk, they're all low when it comes to protein. So maybe 1 to 3 grams of protein per serving, unless protein has been added to the mix. There's a couple of newer variations of almond milk where they've added soy protein to increase the protein content. Oat milk is sometimes can be not a bad option. It depends on the brand. So it can be anywhere from 1 to 4 grams of protein per serving. So your meat, also a great source of protein. And this is where people are always like, I don't know how much protein is in there. Half a chicken breast is about 22 to 25 grams, or like 1 chicken leg, 1 thigh. Again, depending on the size, the smaller would be a little bit less, but that's typically like a decent size when it comes to a leg or a thigh is about 22 grams of protein. Or if you're doing like ground meat, it's about half a cup. If you're having like a steak, it's about 3.5 to 4 ounces is what we're considering. Even something like tuna, like canned tuna, it's about half a can of a standard size can of tuna. So in the States, I think that's about 5 ounces. So that's about 15 grams. So again, when I'm listing these out, they're very small volumes, but what's key is really trying to have them frequently and consistently throughout the day. I mentioned eggs earlier, so this one's always the one where I think people underestimate, or I should say overestimate, the protein in an egg. So there's only 6 grams of protein in 1 egg. So that's where I'm saying like you need to have a minimum of 2 eggs and then have other things to kind of get you to that 20 to 30 gram level. If you do 4 eggs, you're at 24 grams right there, right? But I know that's a hard sell for a lot of people. Nuts, seeds, beans, lentils, all excellent sources, and they're all, again, half cup servings or a quarter cup servings I have listed there are all good sources of protein. If you're vegetarian or eating more plant-based, those are all good options. And then even grain products. I think this is an area that people always forget about. So we're looking at things like wheat, barley, quinoa, farro buckwheat, like these are all can be excellent protein sources. Even pasta. A lot of people poo-poo pasta, again, with our low carb craze. But if you actually look for 100% durum wheat pasta versus like the partially enriched or enriched wheat pastas that we have, you'll be surprised at how much protein and fiber is in there. So they can be good options to kind of, again, get you into that 20 to 30 gram level to make sure that you're getting adequate amount of protein in there. What about protein in your medication? So this is always an interesting topic as well. So Why does protein sometimes interfere with your absorption of levodopa? So levodopa and dietary protein kind of use the same pathway to cross the gastrointestinal lining. And so once protein is digested, it's broken down into like smaller pieces called amino acids, and these need to be absorbed in your bloodstream. And if there are some particular amino acids in your small intestine or your bloodstream, then when levodopa comes along, sometimes there's just not enough of those transporters to transport them into your bloodstream. And so for some people, it can be an issue. And so for some people, dietary protein gets absorbed first and then, that it goes through this stream. So some people might find that it could interfere with their absorption of levodopa. However, it's generally a very small percentage of Parkinson's patients, and it typically can be more noticeable the longer you have the disease. So again, if you think you might be protein sensitive, I would highly recommend that you discuss this with your healthcare team. So don't restrict protein. So when I started as a dietitian 20 plus years ago, we used to tell Parkinson's patients to restrict protein, and then we end up with really like frail Parkinson's patients. In over the years, the medication has changed, the formulation has changed, so it's not so imperative that you restrict protein. A lot of times what we tell our patients is take your levodopa at least 30 minutes before a protein containing meal. Usually that's enough for the levodopa to start getting absorbed, and it reduces that potential interaction. If you get nauseous taking the levodopa on an empty stomach, then try taking it with something that doesn't have protein in it. So a cracker, mashed banana, applesauce, a glass of juice, something like that. If you find that you get quite nauseous, if you're taking it on its own. And again, I would stress, like, if it's something that you think might be an issue, please talk to your medical team to see if it is possibly an issue. So when do you seek out help? So basically, like, I don't want people to wait until they've lost a large amount of weight before asking for a dietitian consult, because by then it sometimes it's too late sometimes, or it's just other issues have happened, like that loss of muscle, that loss of independence. So if you notice that your appetite has changed, you're just finding like you're not as hungry or you're eating less, you've lost your interest in food, you're having any kind of GI issues, like food's just not settling right with you, or you feel like, oh, I just feel like nothing's moving, like I eat a meal and like I come for lunch and it just feels like it's still there. If you're having any kind of swallowing issues, if you find you're eating and things are getting stuck, or you find you're clearing your throat quite often or coughing, that is sometimes an indication that things might not be working so well. If you notice weight changes, or again, like I said in the last slide, if you feel that maybe there's some protein and medication issues, these are all great reasons to ask for a dietitian consult. So check to see if your local movement disorders clinic has access to a registered dietitian, or your primary care physician may have access to a dietitian in their network. It's always hard for me to say this because I live in Canada, so our system is very different to yours, but those would be some places to check to see where you have access to a dietitian with. So that's my presentation. So again, thank you for taking the time to listening to me today. And I want to thank Parkinson's Foundation for providing me with this opportunity to talk about this important topic. So I will send it back to Krista.
Oh, thank you, Shameem. I'm feeling really guilty about what I had for lunch.
No guilt, no guilt.
Just for fun, maybe people can share in the chat what they had for breakfast, for lunch, or what they're preparing for dinner tonight, just to see how inspiration is coming from your talk. So we got some really good questions, and naturally, one of our viewers asked about the absorption of carbidopa, levodopa in relation to protein. So thank you for addressing that. And I believe that was Susan. Shameem did address that. If you would just talk a little bit, just to really hit the nail on the head, if you will, on the absorption of your carbidopa, levodopa in relation to protein intake.
So they both compete for absorption in your small intestine. And so, like I said, so when protein is digested, it breaks down into amino acids, and these amino acids use the same transporter that levodopa uses to leave your small intestine into your bloodstream. We just don't have this infinite number of these transporters. So there's always this competition level, right? And again, food seems to be highly absorbed first versus medication. So that's why we recommend our patients take your medication first, because it allows for time for that medication to be absorbed or start to be absorbed and maybe have access to those transporters before food comes along.
Thank you for reiterating that for all of us. I know it's an ongoing challenge in Parkinson's disease to really manage timing of medication and also timing of the need for nourishment. So I appreciate you coming back to that.
No problem. And the other thing is, I mean, obviously as people progress, like the timing between medications gets shorter for a lot of people. And so people are always like, well, there's no time because I have to take my next med before, so there's no time to have the medication before a meal. And we always, the physicians I work with, we always don't want people to restrict protein for that. Like there are other ways we can manage the medication. So if that is something that you're experiencing, again, highly recommend you go back to your neurologist or whoever is managing your Parkinson's to have that discussion, because we don't want people to start to lose weight because it can lead to other poor outcomes.
Yeah, important fact to return to. I want to highlight that Richard messaged us what he had. He had a protein shake and lunch was leftover chicken and dumplings. That sounds delicious. Thanks for sharing, Richard. Catherine's curious about sensitivities to gluten, soy, and dairy. Can you speak to how we can get nourishing protein from other sources outside of gluten, soy, and dairy, or how that might impact our health?
That's a good question. I always go back, like, so when I first started as a dietitian, that was 20 years ago, and where I did my internship, there was a high percentage of people who had celiac disease, so they are allergic to gluten. So I always got the gluten-free consult, and it was always a really hard one because back then, like in Canada, there was one store that was gluten-free, specialized in gluten-free products. So you literally like, well, here's the store that you have to get products from. So now I will say there is much more opportunity, and we have access to a lot of products. So it can be challenging. Everything requires planning, but if you are gluten free, there are a lot of options. And again, gluten free grains like quinoa is very high in protein, a high fiber choice as well. There's lots of like different ancient grains that are gluten free that, beyond what we typically use in North America. A lot of the gluten free products do tend to be like lower in protein and lower in fiber. But however, like I said, there's much more options. Even with the dairy free, like I had mentioned, like there are good dairy alternatives like the pea milk would be one if you're sensitive to soy. Soy milk is a really good dairy alternative if you can tolerate soy. If not, like I said, pea milk is quite high in protein. So there are options. Like it's much easier to manage intolerances now than it has been in the past. And I would just assume it's just going to get better, right? Because they're always coming up with new products. So that would be a really good consult for a dietitian to help you find the resources for that wherever you are. So I always plug my profession anywhere I can get. So if you can go seek out and find a dietitian, like this is what we do. We are the food and nutrition experts. So, and if we don't know, we are very good at finding out the answer. So I really strongly, if you have access to a dietitian, I would strongly encourage you to use them.
Thanks, Shameem. And Claire, one of our viewers, actually mentioned pea protein in a question. Is pea protein powder or peanut butter powder in smoothies a good option?
Yeah, really excellent option, especially like the powdered peanut butter, because again, if people just don't want to increase volume, or again, if you're traveling and you're just like, I don't want to take a big container of peanut butter with me, it's just dried peanut peanut powder, right? So you just reconstitute it, and so you still get all the nutrition just in a smaller volume. And same thing with pea protein. There's lots of protein powders on the market. It's really hard to keep on top of like what's the best one. I typically tell people, like, if you're not dairy sensitive, then try to pick a whey protein, because whey protein is what our muscles use most effectively and efficiently for maintenance. But if you are dairy sensitive, you have a milk allergy, or you're just sensitive to it, then the pea protein is an excellent option.
Thank you for that. And we have additional questions coming in about carbidopa levodopa intake in relation to protein. Shameem has addressed that question a few times, so be sure to come back to the recording at a later time when we send that out. Greg is sharing that he or they are on a low saturated fat diet due to cardiovascular challenges, and given some insight onto the need for high fat in a Parkinson's disease diet, if you will. What might you offer to kind of balance the needs of both of these challenges as we age?
That's a good question, because a lot of people don't just have one health condition, right? Unfortunately. So in relation to cardiovascular disease, so a lot of the fats that I mentioned are considered unsaturated fats. So the oils that I mentioned, so like olive oil, avocado oil, like there's walnut oil, flaxseed, any oil that is based from a nut and seed is typically a low unsaturated fat, or sorry, high unsaturated fat, low saturated fat source. Avocado would be another one where the fat source is predominantly the healthy fats, nuts and seeds. Um, Even dairy, again, we have to kind of balance the, are you losing a large amount of weight? Is that maybe more pressing than managing your cardiovascular risk, right? Like, so again, you'd have to talk to your health professional to make sure, like, what level are they comfortable. A lot of times I get that with patients who have diabetes, right? So they're very concerned about their glycemic control, which they should be, but sometimes to the detriment, right? So I always have to go back. I'm like, okay, well, ask your physician who's managing that condition, like, do they want strict control? Are they okay liberalizing it a little? Like, can we add a little bit just to, again, keep the weight from going down more? So, um, like I said, the options that I've mentioned, are a lot of them are high unsaturated fat, like healthy fat options. So you can balance the two, but sometimes we get to the point where we have to decide, like, which one are we going to work on, because it's much more concerning, because we don't want to have that unintentional weight loss, that loss of muscle, the loss of independence, because it's, like I said, it's difficult to regain any of that muscle loss, especially also with Parkinson's. Like, when you have a neurodegenerative condition, any muscle that we lose from the condition, we can't regain. So we just have to make sure we don't lose any additional through any diet inadequacy. So it's a balancing act sometimes. I think that's why nutrition sometimes is confusing, right? Because you've got all the balls that you have to juggle.
Right, and it's a constant change too, where what we need in a day can differ, and just being open to fluidity of what the needs are for the body and in tune with that. Thank you for addressing that. Tim and Mary are asking, that they write, you have addressed weight loss, but what about weight gain? Is it strictly a question of discipline and eating, or connected to my Parkinson's? So Tim and Mary just asking for clarification. Is this around someone gaining weight or wanting to gain weight? So a little bit of clarification there, if you would offer that to us.
I mean, my presentation was focused more on like unintentional weight loss, because that can lead to, like I said, muscle loss. Weight gain, again, it's all very it's dependent on when the weight gain happens, right? Um, Weight gain, when we're older, sometimes it is okay to have a little extra cushion, right? Because again, having that little extra, recovering from like a cold, is a little bit easier versus if you don't have that little extra cushioning, right? Um, Again, as a dietitian, like, depending on the life stage, I don't see weight gain in an elderly population as an issue. I actually would encourage, again, maybe not weight gain, but at least weight maintenance lifelong, right? Because of all the consequences that can happen with weight loss. Uh, so again, it would depend on the rate of weight gain too, right? Like that, I think that's the other thing. Like when I talk to patients that are like, "Oh, I gained 5 pounds," and I'm like, really, 5 pounds is not a large amount, right? It could be fluid gain. It could be you're constipated and haven't had a good empty, right? So it's hard, like, because again, as I had said, like our society really values weight loss, and looks at weight gain in a negative view. And I'm always like, well, perspective, like how much weight gain are we talking about, right? So I don't know if I answered your question, but just put that bug out there.
Yeah, thanks, Shameem. Um, More questions about protein. So thinking about MVR says if packaged foods have protein listed as an ingredient, how do we know if that is a complete protein? And I've heard the jargon clean protein. If not, how do we know what amino acids it has or which amino acids we need to get from another food? So it's twofold, amino acids and protein. And how do we decipher or discern what's healthy and what's not?
That's actually a really good question. I think as dietitians, we look more globally. So as long as you're eating balanced and you're eating a variety of foods, you're gonna get all your essential amino acids, right? Um, so I always never look to like, oh, am I making sure I get all my leucine? I don't do that, right? Like I just make sure all of my protein choices, like I try to eat different things, good variety in my diet. I'm not vegetarian, so it is easier for me to get my protein intake in because I eat chicken, I eat fish, I eat beef. But I also am from a culture where I eat a lot of beans and lentils and things like that. So you get the combination of both. Now, the question about like processed foods or foods in general, a lot of people do look at the nutrition facts label first, and it's not a bad place to start, but I always tell people look at your ingredient list first because that tells you what's in there, right? If you can read your ingredient list and like the first couple of ingredients listed, there are things like, so for instance, let's say it's a pasta dish of some sort, right? But like, say it was a bolognese, right? So you would expect that some sort of meat would be listed within the first two ingredients. But if it's further down the line, like find something else, right? Because you're not getting the protein in there, right? If the first thing is listed is like tomato sauce or something like that, I'm like, you're not getting enough protein, or the pasta is that enriched pasta, it's not going to be a high protein food choice, right? So you have to really read the ingredient list first is where I would tell people to start with, and then kind of go to the protein amount, and also serving size is a really big place to look, right? So that's kind of where I would get people to start with, is really look at your ingredient list first and read what's in the product.
And I love this question. Tim is asking, how does chocolate work for weight gain?
I support chocolate as a food source for weight gain. It shouldn't be your full like sole source when it comes to weight gain, but chocolate is again, like chocolate is a flavoring. So if you're not if you got low appetite, but if that's something that sparks your appetite, great. Chocolate like with milk fat in there, great. Like chocolate can certainly be part of a healthy eating pattern for sure. It just can't be your only source of nutrition. And chocolate with nuts is always a great thing.
Is there a something to look for when you are selecting the chocolate of choice at the grocery store? White chocolate, dark chocolate, milk chocolate, perhaps looking at that ingredient list again. So maybe thinking about the health of the chocolate. Can you speak to that?
I mean, truly, like the darker the chocolate, the less sugar there is in there. So, from a health perspective, your dark chocolate choices would be your optimal choices, right? Um, and then, it would go down to milk chocolate. White chocolate is not even chocolate, right? So, so if anyone likes white chocolate, I apologize, but it's not chocolate. Um, so you'd also again have to read the ingredient list. Like, so say you had like 3 milk chocolate bars and you're trying to figure out like, okay, which one's better? Like again, look to see where sugar falls in the list. If sugar's the first, then that's the one that's the ingredient that's in the product the most by weight, right? So again, look for quality when you're looking at chocolate. But dark chocolate, from a nutrition perspective, has some antioxidants. It's good for lowering blood pressure. So dark chocolate's the way to go. And like I said, chocolate with nuts. Nuts are always the best thing. So anytime you can consume nuts, and even if it's chocolate covered almonds, I still take that as a win.
Great. Love the suggestion of chocolate with nuts. Um, Couple more questions before we close out our time together. Tom is asking, what about the interaction between fats, cholesterol, and heart health? So I know we kind of came and circled around to cardiovascular health, and just for Tom's question, can you talk or speak to the interaction between fats, cholesterol, and the health of the heart?
So if you have high cholesterol, so if you've gone to your physician, they've done a blood test and your cholesterol levels are high, we typically tell people, again, it's total fat intake that you have to be mindful of. And the messaging we've changed over the last couple of years, we really try to get people to focus more on choosing unsaturated or healthy fats versus the unhealthy fat. I feel like at this point, we all kind of know what the unhealthy fats are, right? Like, it's full like meat, like the fat on steak, right? Like that's the saturated fat, that's the unhealthy fat, that's the type of fat that can over time um stay in your blood vessels. They can start hardening, and they kind of constrict your arteries, and that can lead to other health complications. So we're always trying to get people to choose more of the healthy fats, and I, as a dietitian, I'm really trying to get people to move away from the what can't I eat mode of thinking, and trying to choose like, well, what can I eat? Because that's what we should be focusing on, right? Like, we all know what we should be eating. Like, come on, right? But we need maybe more guidance and like, well, what are these healthier fat options that I can incorporate into my eating pattern? And again, a lot of them not only good for your heart, but good for your brain, good for mood. So there's lots of multiple health benefits in those foods that we're encouraging. So I don't know if that answered your question, Tom, but we do try to focus more on choosing more healthy fats to help lower cholesterol.
I love the idea of you sharing, focus on what you can eat and not what you should stay away from.
Right? Because as soon as you tell someone not to eat something, that's the first thing we all crave, right? So I'm trying to get away from that, and I'm usually pretty good. I because I don't like being told what to do, so I like to encourage people to try different things. And again, variety is really the key to optimal health. The more variety you have in your diet, there's so many good health outcomes with that. And also, it just keeps your interest, right? Like, I mean, some people are really great. They can eat the same thing every single day. And if you can do that, all the power to you. But myself, that is not something I can do. So I'm always trying to encourage people to eat a variety of food if they can, because you get so much more nutritional benefit from that.
Mm. Carol is asking, how do we increase our muscle mass?
So again, it's very difficult to increase muscle mass, especially as we get older. So again, the key is trying to maintain what muscle you still have. And so the first thing is trying to eat protein throughout the day. And then that slide where I had resistance training and gave some examples. So like I said, the squats were to a chair, or resistance band, like those work those muscles and help maintain them. Wall push-ups is another one. So there's lots of different resistance training out there. Again, that's not my area of expertise. So I, again, would really encourage you, if you have a movement disorder program that has a physical therapist who specializes in working with Parkinson's patients or have access to them, they're excellent, excellent resources to help with weight muscle maintenance.
Got two more questions, one from Blair and kind of a combination from Helen and Rick. And actually, I think, Catherine, you bring up a good question about diabetes. So Catherine's asking, what if you're pre-diabetic? What does that mean for our health and wellness?
So pre-diabetes means you are at risk for developing diabetes, and so it definitely is something to be concerned about. And it's your opportunity to maybe make changes to your lifestyle so that you don't develop diabetes. So again, a lot of the pre-diabetes lifestyle management suggestions we have are pretty typical. Like try to eat a balanced diet, try to follow that like Mediterranean pattern of eating, which emphasizes lots of fruits and vegetables. It's not a low carbohydrate diet, but it's choosing like high quality carbohydrates, so whole grains, use of like lots of spices, herbs. It's not dairy free. Predominantly in that area of the world, they use a lot of like fermented like yogurt. But if you're not dairy, there's like the dairy alternatives. They use like olive oil pretty much exclusively in that area of the world. So that's again a good example of that unsaturated or healthy fat. They eat lots of nuts and seeds. They eat lots of beans and lentils. So beans and lentils are an excellent plant-based protein, but they're what we call a complex carbohydrate. So they are a good source of fiber as well. So these are things that, if you are pre-diabetic, there are foods that your body doesn't take some time to digest, so you don't get these large spikes of blood sugar after a meal versus say like eating like a refined carbohydrate like white bread or a Twinkie or something like that. In the Mediterranean pattern of eating, they eat a lot of omega-3 rich fatty fish because they can. They're around the ocean, right? If you're like me, who lives in a landlocked area, it gets a little tricky, but there's options. And again, even red meat isn't off the table on the Mediterranean pattern of eating. It's all about like how often and how frequent you do things. So you can still have some red meat and poultry. It's just, again, it's the ratio of like how often do you have that. So that's probably where I would say, like, if that is something that you've been told, go that route. And again, try to find a dietitian to help you with that, because they can really set you up so that you may reduce your risk of developing diabetes.
So again, just reiterating about protein intake, Helen and Rick are asking really similar questions here. What would you recommend to increase protein? What about adding protein supplements to smoothies or other kind of foods? So
Yeah,
speaking to
100%. Like I said, the best advice I can give you is try to aim for that 20 to 30 grams at each meal, because that will typically, that range will give you adequate amount of protein. So again, if you've normally made a smoothie and you kind of like are now looking at the components and you realize, oh wait, like my smoothie typically just has fruit in it and I use, say, juice to blend it up. Maybe consider swapping out that juice with a yogurt or a milk or one of those higher protein plant-based options, right? Or say you don't like any of those, then yeah, protein powder is an excellent option to increase the protein content of your smoothie, right? When you're thinking about snacks, like try to think like, well, can I add a protein to this? So for instance, like say you have an apple. Apple's a great snack, but apple with peanut butter or apple with cheese is even a better snack, right? Because you've got that protein component to it. So again, think along those lines. Or again, you like nuts and seeds, well then maybe you just have to snack on them throughout the day to get that full 8 extra grams that you need, right? So again, it's just looking to make sure every meal is balanced, so you have a good adequate amount of protein in there, but you can't ignore the other. You still need your carbohydrates, you still need your fruits and vegetables. So again, it's that balancing act. But the nice thing with protein is it's not about the volume that you have to eat. It's just making sure you have protein at each meal. That's really key.
And you just addressed a question that came in. So I hope you heard that it did, having protein at every meal. So it's not about how many meals, but having protein at that meal. Our last question, Shameem, and I want to thank you for your time today. And I think this is an important one to end with. Blair is sharing she's having a really hard time finding a dietitian, and note she's in the Los Angeles area. And assuming that this would be a community where there would be a
Mm-hmm.
dietitian. Any
Mm-hmm.
recommendations on finding someone with a specialty and dietitian and also with knowledge of Parkinson's disease?
Oh, I'm kind of surprised. Like again, I come from the north, so I assume Los Angeles would have these opportunities. Um, maybe the easiest. I don't know if you go to a movement disorder clinic, but they might be your first stop to see like, do they have access to a dietitian? Like, because again, I don't know how it's set up where you are, but like a lot of the clinics that we have are specialty clinics. If there isn't a dietitian attached to it, they have access to a dietitian. Sometimes there's like a general outpatient dietitian. In the States, there is the Academy of Nutrition, which is like the big um, organization, a professional organization for dietitians. They might have a find a dietitian in your area on their website. I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar with the States. I know in Canada we have that option in there. Sometimes even if it's not nationally, if you Google's a great tool, right? If you Google like dietitians in Los Angeles with Parkinson's expertise, you might be surprised what comes up in that way. And again, it may not be the first click that you get, but you could call someone and see like, okay, because the dietitian group, again, we're pretty good. Like we talk amongst ourselves. Well, if we don't do that area, we'll find someone to help you out with. So that might be an option to look at too.
Okay. Thank you, Shameem, for your time and your knowledge and the amount of effort that you put into sharing about this important topic in our progress of aging and also the trajectory of the disease. So appreciate all the effort that you put into today's webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate this.
And if you had any questions today that we just could not get to, please don't hesitate to explore the Parkinson's website at parkinson.org. You can also call our helpline at 1-800-4PD-INFO or email us at helpline@parkinson.org. If you are looking for resources like a registered dietitian who specializes in Parkinson's disease in your neighborhood, the helpline is a really, really useful tool and resource of Parkinson's specialists to help guide you and navigate the world wide web of resources that are could be offered telehealth or through local clinics in your area. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for tuning in and for exploring ways that we can continue to manage our health and wellness through maintaining our weight and muscle mass. We'll see you guys again soon. Until then, be well.